guys, I know what you're thinking out the gate. This place screams data analytics. All right? All right. Well, you guys are in for a treat today because I have two awesome guests up here with me. We have a creative background, and it's going to bring some dynamics to the subject. And we have this gentleman sitting next to me who has iconic brands that most of us have either played with, put our hands on, or grown up with, which is truly special for this event now. So in preparation for this event, I decided to look up, what does predictive analytics even mean, right? You're talking to like a C student in math right now. So I look it up, and what I found is that it derives from a Latin word that means to predict, to announce, or to set long-term events, right? So I thought that was super interesting. And so given that's the case, I figured, that's kind of interesting because that wasn't necessarily sort of how I would have defined it, but it makes total sense, right? And what I started to realize really quickly is that we could all have a different sort of definition of what predictive analytics means. So the first question I'd like to ask each of you guys is, when you hear the word predictive analytics, what does that mean to you and how would you define it?
Thank you. So it's an interesting question. For me, I think about how, so at Mattel, our key brands, Hot Wheels, Barbie, Fisher-Price, we sell those through huge retailers, right? So we're disaggregated from the conversion data. So when I hear predictive analytics, the first thing is I'm always jealous of people who have their own conversion data and being able to do real performance marketing where you're tracking your marketing all the way through to conversion. We can't do that, right? So for me, I think of it as how am I using data that exists to generate insights that I can make actionable to inform our marketing strategies, and then we got to try to measure it after the fact and continually adjust. And for us, it's a science, but it's got to be a science that informs the art because there's no it's not like there's an answer in the bottom right of the spreadsheet. And so it's really about informing insights that inform our strategies.
Great answer. Gerald, what do you think?
Well, the funny thing, I'm looking at it from a creative aspect, right? So when you look at creative, everybody looks at things, they take it in, and then they register it. I always feel that driving around LA, you know where you live, you know where things are, but occasionally you have to put on a GPS. So I always look at when I think of predictive analytics, I'm like, that's just like the GPS of marketing. Like, kind of in the area you want to be at, but how can you get there faster? How can you get to that target where you need to be, avoid the traffic that's everybody else is building up on, because everybody gets caught up on these trends and say, hey, I have to go there because that's what everybody's doing. And when you know who your audience is, it's easier to know, like, what is the audience doing? What are they watching? How are they engaging with our brand? And it's very different when you think of it from linear television, where there's also a streaming component to it. So now there's always multiple places where we need to find them at different times of the day. So we use that data-driven analytics and insights to kind of say, okay, we know that the majority of people watching our television, our shows, whether they're procedurals, whether they're comedies, whether they're some of our documentaries or events, we know who they are, but then where are they at and when are they engaging with our content is where we need to find out how do we target them for marketing to get them to the next event or to get them to the next viewing tentpole that we want to set up. So we look at predictive analytics and saying like, hey, how can we just use a quick GPS to tell us, okay, how are we going to get African-American females 35 through 50 to tune into SWAT because they love Shamar Moore? Or how can we get those that love LL Cool J on Hawaii to show up? We need to target them where they're watching it. Or if we have a big event like the Grammys that's coming up, we know they watch music, but it's right around that same time with Super Bowl. So now we have to use that same predictive analytics. Or if they're going to be showing up for their sports because they have to be there with their husband or with whoever their boo is, and they're watching this game on Kansas City and Taylor's there, how do we target them there to make sure that they show up for what we're doing at the Grammys the following week?
I love your example of great GPS. You know who else has a great GPS? Kia. 560 horses. Beats you there, fans. Right? So, great example all the way through. Now that you sort of define what predictive analytics are and how you can use them, I'm curious in terms of like setting your long-term bets, right? For example, when you think of CBS, there's probably a long cycle to get shows up and get them running. When you're thinking about Mattel, there's plenty of toys that are coming down for holiday time frame. toys that are coming out through different parts of the year. How do you use predictive analytics to set some of your long-term bets? Gerald, you want to start us on this one?
Oh, wow. Well, okay, we just lived through this. Everybody went through the pandemic, right? But we went through this thing called the strike. So we had a writer's strike, and we had an actor's strike, and we had a fall season that everybody wants to show up for. But wait a minute, we have no writers, we have no actors. So we use predictive analytics to try to say, okay, we do have one thing. And the one thing that we did have that year, which was like a godsend, we had the Super Bowl. So by having the Super Bowl, we said, wow, we had this, but now we know predictively where people are showing up on social, where they're at when as far as they're watching TV and then they're on our AVOD. We said, okay, how do we create a fake fall season? So what we did, we were able to kind of take what's happening with the Super Bowl, and then we launched all of our shows at the tail end of the Super Bowl. And at the same time, not only did we launch some of our shows, we also launched one of our new shows, Tracker, which now, shameless plug, #1 show in television, now going season 2, October 13th. I have to say that, that's what people do. But by adding that to the Super Bowl, you have all these viewers tuning in for the Super Bowl, and then right after that, and everybody hopes and prays. It's a huge bet, thinking that, after that last touchdown and everybody's going to celebrate, are they going to stay on to watch that first episode of that new show? So that was a huge bet, but by using analytics, we showed that most people leave it on. Whether they're on that channel or not, they're going to leave that channel on, whether like, oh, they won, I'm going to go grab a beer, oh, they won, I'm going to go to the bathroom, and then the show has already started. So we were able to get viewers that would normally tune in for a brand new show to be there, but then at the tail end of that, with all our marketing as we led up to it, with Super Bowl, we let people know that something big was coming the following week, and we had everybody on the road. So I think that was a great way we're able to kind of use it in a predictive way long term. But we use it all the time for holiday. We know when we think of like Thanksgiving Day Parade, we think of New Year's Eve. It's not as big as the huge Dick Clark, Ryan Seacrest New Year's Day Parade, but we know that a lot of our viewers are in Nashville. They love country music is a huge component of all of our shows. We do our New Year's Eve show in Kansas, actually in Nashville to do that. So it's using where our people are, who are the people that watch CBS over the mix of our shows, and targeting them where they can be at so that we can actually give them what they want.
And you'll actually never believe this. I actually did watch that country music.
You did?
100%.
Thank God.
Surprise. Yeah, I sure did. Jason, what about you? How are you setting your long-term bets using predictive analytics?
Yeah, so I'll give some answers from a media and marketing perspective. So if you go back to last year before the Barbie movie came out, believe it or not, in retrospect, before the movie came out, we didn't know it was going to be $1 billion movie. Like, you have no idea, right? And we actually got a rare, I'll say very rare gift of some extra paid media budget before the movie came out because we wanted to juice our sales a little bit, right? And so what we did in one of our tools is a MMM, media mix model. So what we did is we ran some simulations with that incremental budget that we got to figure out where we should apply that money in terms of our channel mix. So what's interesting about that is an MMM only uses the data that existed for us. We don't do it as frequently as I would like yet, so it's the year before. When you think of, for us, we have 3 audiences that we're marketing to. We're marketing to kids, we're marketing to the shoppers for kids, and then we also have like a collector business. People buy Hot Wheels cars, and we do make Kias, by the way. We texted our head of design. And so like one of the things for that is, and kids are like the tip of the spear of changing consumer and content behavior, right? Because they don't have the nostalgia that we have about whatever platform or service. So they're like, oh, the streaming thing's better. I'm just going to do streaming and stop watching linear. So one of the other things we do predictively with our media agency is we're like just kind of guessing where we think consumption and ratings are going to change and proactively adjusting our media mix without really having that data. Because especially over the last couple of years, if we didn't do that, we would have been way off of where kids were. And then I'll give one more example for the shoppers that we've been doing lately is because we're disaggregated from the conversion data, we're trying to partner with our retail partners who have that data and then buying streaming through them. And so for an example, it's Hot Wheels, and we're looking at, okay, who are households that either through propensity modeling we think are likely to buy Hot Wheels or in market for Hot Wheels. we do some negative targeting, and then we push that data out into our connected TV buy to try to reach those households or those shoppers who we think are most likely to buy this next Hot Wheels product as an incremental purchase.
Two thoughts immediately when you say that is, number one is, how old is Mattel as a brand? Just hypothetically.
I'll tell you exactly. We're going to have our 80th anniversary next year. So it was founded in a garage in Southern California right after World War II.
Here's why I'm asking you that question. Is an 80-year-old company doing mixed media modeling, which is a completely innovative way of measurement, is, I don't want that to get lost, because that is extremely cutting edge for an 80-year-old company. That's impressive.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is I have a 6-year-old son, and I told him I was coming to Malibu. And the first question he asked me is, can I take a picture of Barbie? So I might need some help on that later. Still trying to figure out how to solve that, but awesome.
I'm sure there's an AI tool for that.
Next question I have for you guys. So we talked about long-term bets. We've already defined what predictive analytics are. The next question I want to ask for you is, like, what happens when your big bets are not necessarily panning out? So what causes that, right? Well, things change. Consumer habits are changing. Pop culture moments are popping up often. And the things that kids want to buy shift really quickly. You had just mentioned, you had no idea how big Barbie's success was going to be. All of a sudden it exploded. Mm-hmm. How does that ultimately change your strategy and how you stay nimble from predictive analytics to try to navigate some of this uncertainty that you're facing?
Well, the first thing that happens is lots of meetings and PowerPoint files. But then after that, I would say for us, like, to give an example in our digital space, we've in-housed over the past couple of years, like all of our influencer marketing and all of our social marketing. We created our production center of excellence. So, you know, we're a relatively large company. Obviously, we take very seriously conforming with all the rules around, you know, marketing to kids and in the digital space. And we don't do that at all in social media, by the way, I should say, right? But in our social media calendars, we're laying out calendars in advance in conjunction with the marketing department, as you would imagine. But then what we also did is we in-housed our production, and we made sure that we set aside some money so that we could do really fast, lo-fi content production based on a trend that's happening on TikTok or a trend that's happening on Instagram. And the teams really just try to match. We don't pursue every trend. We look at a trend, and then we see if it kind of matches the values and the positioning of that brand. And if it's a match, then we try to make some really fast lo-fi content to get that into those.
And I think similar to that, we do it a little differently. But a lot of similarities where we know what our base core is. We know, every fall people tune in for shows. We know every May shows go off, and then there's that period of the summer where you want to keep people on the hook and everybody's out kind of trying to enjoy their life, but you want to still let them know that they can stream and catch up. So with knowing that, we want to make sure we never try to go after trends, because I think a lot of people try to follow trends and they end up in a place where their core is then like, hey, who are you? What are you doing this? And CBS, we're coming up on being 100 years as a network in 2028, which is incredible. But at the same time, our logo has never changed. It's been the same CBSI, and we want to make sure that people understand that. So a lot of people, when they watch CBS, they understand CBS Sports. They understand that there's a lot of CBS shows out there that are studio-based, but they don't know that these are acted out shows. So if you ever watch Jeopardy, if you ever watch Wheel of Fortune, they've always been on other affiliate networks, but you don't know that's our show. So we're trying to fix those things right now. But when we look at our analytics, we try to figure out, okay, we have some small influencers that like our shows, whether it's Survivor, which are big hits, which are kind of cross-generational. So how do we take on things where we bring families together? How do we look at when I grew up watching CBS, I would always I watch shows like Murder, She Wrote, I watch Texas, Texas Ranger with Chuck Norris. So all these shows that are usually predominantly old shows, music driven, when people think about the marketing behind it, has to be these are old white men at a certain age, but you would think that a person coming up from Queens would not be watching this, but because you're in a multi-generational household, you're sitting there with your grandma, your grandfather, your dad, they're picking a TV show for you. So now that behavior is a little bit different where kids get to kind of, okay, I'm going to go on YouTube and I'm going to watch what I want to watch. So what we double down on knowing that behavior is out there and families still kind of watch together on different devices, we went to figure out how do we do media buys with YouTube? Or like when we're promoting our premiere weeks as they come out, how do we have our ads on YouTube, but at the same time partner with people like with Amazon to do stuff like for day sales. So if there's like a whole day of viewing, you can go clue into your Amazon Alexa and say, Alexa, what's on for Sunday? Oh, you have Face the Nation, and then you can go to football, and then you go to 60 Minutes, and then you can go into like launching some of our new shows for Sunday evening. So it's like different playful ways to kind of use those analytics of how people watch together. Because the bigger thing is like how are you getting together, how are you watching and consuming versus the trend of what people are using. The trend, I think, is just like a little hook that people want to hop on, but it's not the main meal that people kind of show up to want to kind of sit there and have.
You talked about spending time with your family. You talked about quality time. There are other love languages out there like physical touch and words of affirmation. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my love language now, which is called first-party data. So I want to ask you a quick question about first-party data and how you guys ultimately leverage it inside your companies and how it plays a vital role in sort of the efforts that you guys do across your marketing campaigns.
Well, first-party data, we use that when you go to our CBS platform. So we know where every user signs on and watches. We know the shows that are in there. We take that data, but we also kind of combine it with like any third-party data we can get as far as like the other ways that they're engaging our content, and we're able to kind of create what you call like a user profile. So this way, now when you sign to your television or smart TV, you already kind of see it now and don't even know it. Where they say, hey, these are shows we suggest you should kind of watch. These are things you might like. So by using the third-party data and first-party data, that user profile will show, okay, this person is always watching comedies. So now we have 4 new comedies that are coming up. You might want to watch these. Or we have reality-based shows, because now reality is a big part of our CBS brand, where people are like, well, I don't really see you in the reality space. I was like, well, wait a minute. Look at Survivor. Look at Big Brother. These are like going on 50 seasons soon when you think about Survivor. And it's like, we just did this huge beach drop that was an activation where people kind of went out to kind of like really be like they're on Survivor. So we use that data when they go to even to events and they're engaging on like some of these activations where they're like freely giving us information about them as a consumer. And then we can pull that all back together and say, okay, so now how can we better serve this community that's watching these shows? And this goes across all our different shows. So we have like over 50 different titles and IP that we have to make sure that we're giving some love to, and then there's a legacy base that we have to kind of also show love to from news and sport. But it's like, how do we make sure that the fan is first? And a lot of times we're always our own fan, and I think to our detriment, where you think you're the best, you go, oh, we love this, and this is who we are. But then we don't look at the analytics and say, wait a minute, we think we're this, but this is who they're saying we are. And this is what they love about us. So then how do we continue to give them what they want?
Makes total sense. Jason?
Yeah, so for us, we own American Girl as well, and American Girl is like a direct business. For them, they use the first-party data in all the ways that you would expect, and we've invested in the CDP, and they're kind of using that for their messaging on the site. For what we call our mainline business, like I've said multiple times, we don't have that, so we're experimenting with different ways to try to use data that we think can approximate like those results and make our media more efficient and effective. So for instance, we're engaged in really trying to map out our consumer journeys to our website. We actually get a lot of organic traffic, especially heading into Q4 to our sites as people search for Barbie and Hot Wheels and et cetera. So we're trying to come up with really specific metrics of like time engaged on site, of measuring like where to click buys, which is what we have on the site, and then trying to use that and model out which audiences we think are higher value audiences. But frankly, it requires a lot of modeling. And one of the things that I've learned over time that I'm really trying to be careful about, because when you're in the type of situation that we're in, you have to be careful not to go too deep in some of these data projects and invest a lot of time and resources where maybe the return on investment isn't there. Because one thing that's interesting that I found, like, so I'm a marketer by background and now also oversee media for a number of years. And when I first got involved on the media side, I was like, okay, now with digital marketing, I'm just going to target this really specific audience and spend less money and we'll have higher conversion rates, and we'll be able to, grow our business spending less out of pocket. But 9 times out of 10, that doesn't really work. Like, our brands are ubiquitously distributed, so we have to get reach. And what tends to be better from a targeting standpoint is going broader. So it's a mix of getting that reach from the media, but then also trying to do some modeling to figure out which audiences maybe we want to reach more frequently moving forward.
Yeah, spot on, and I think that's great insight. One question I want to ask you guys just to sort of wrap up, and then we can see if there's questions from the audience, is we're just 1 quarter away from 2025. What are you guys most excited about as we start to approach the new year? Jason, go ahead, take us through that.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm really excited about is earlier this year we created a new division called Integrated Marketing Communications. And I can spend a lot of time talking about it, but the basic premise behind it from my perspective with the why is that kid reach is lower than it used to be. And what it's going to be for a while moving forward because of what's going on with content, like you said. And, if kids are spending time on some of the streaming services where there's no advertising, you can't reach them, right? And I want to grow our business. So quite simply, the math is we're reaching less people. We want to sell more unit sales. That means that every time someone sees our organic content or a piece of advertising, we have to have higher persuasion rates. That's the only way that we could grow in our business. So we did this huge reorg, moved in people from 27 different budget centers, and essentially kind of combined Marcom teams that were attached to the brands and digital centers of excellence that were separate, created marketing operations, created a production center of excellence, really all with the concept of being more idea-led, to be more idea-led by our creative team, to match that up with our audiences, and to try to get more integrated creative that could really break through. So we're in the middle of that journey right now, and I'm really excited to see how that's going to play out in our 2025 marketing.
I would say the number one thing I'm excited about is when I came to CBS, we did things very archaic. Imagine some people there 30 plus years. We were able to develop a creative agency internally to develop and do all our creative marketing across now studios, Paramount Television, sports, entertainment, and our affiliates. So this is going to be the first fall season that is led by this creative team where we're able to kind of fire up all cylinders across all these different verticals. And we're starting with October 13th being our premiere week. So with premiere week, similar to what we did with Super Bowl, this is like the first fall back after the strike where it's going to be a full year of television watching. But now we're also taking an approach of how do we do better fan engagement. We haven't always done this in the past. So things I'm excited about right now is we have a 60th anniversary. We have Star Trek coming up. So we have some great activations that are going to be fan-driven around that, as well as going into the 50th anniversary for Survivor. I cannot believe it's 50 seasons of Survivor, but one of my favorite shows, Jeff Probst is amazing. The way he is on TV is the way he is in person, and that's what I love about him. So we're doing a lot of activations around that, and we also created this thing called the Comfy Blue Sofa, where it's going to allow people to kind of pop up at places like the Minnesota State Fair where we just did it, but in other different iconic places across America, you will see this sofa popping up where families can kind of come together to watch TV and get ready for the return of celebrating simple TV and satisfaction. So that, and also gearing up to our 100-year anniversary of CBS, there's going to be a lot of cool merch involved, because I think that's the other thing people don't understand when you watch TV, and I'm sure you're well with consumer products. People like to watch it, but at the same time, they like to be able to engage with the brand further after that. And I think this is going to be the first time you'll see a lot of cool activations and collabs coming from some of our CBS IP. So I'm very excited about that new kind of wave of taking something old and bringing it into the zeitgeist of culture and fun.
Awesome, guys. Well, I appreciate you guys sitting up here with us, sharing some of your thoughts about the business. We covered lots of stuff today. We covered predictive analytics. We covered GPS systems. We covered the way you can use it for short-term, long-term, how to be nimble, how first-party data plays a role in the way that they plan their strategies. We also covered some really cool stuff that's coming down the pipeline soon. I don't know if anyone has any questions for these guys before we get out of here, but if you do, just let us know. We're happy to take some questions.
I have a question for Jason first, but it actually might be applicable. It's certainly applicable for both of you. So I know that Mattel has a lot of activations, experiential activations, such as the Polly Pocket Airbnb experience and such. How do you guys decide what are the right activations for you? I imagine you have a lot of different opportunities and partnerships. And as you're doing a bunch of CBS now, it's a great question for both of you.
Yeah. So we're really, looking at our brands. They're not just toy brands anymore. They're intellectual property that we can bring to life in many different ways. So when you think of, I know you mentioned Polly, when you think of the Barbie team last year, I forget what the stat was, but it was something when they told me, I thought it was a mistake. It was like 1,000 different partnerships that they had to vet last year or something like that. And again, it goes back to what I said before, like we have really clear definitions of what we call our brand foundation and our values and our purpose. And we always make sure that we vet things through that first to make sure that we're aligned, because our brands are, yes, they're entertainment brands, but obviously there's product extensions for kids. We take that seriously. And so that's a big part of what our former Marcom, now in the integrated marketing communications teams do. They really vet those incoming things to make sure that it's aligned. And then do we think we could kind of make cultural noise, be prominent in culture? So is it something that's really going to pop in culture, is aligned with their values? And if so, then we move forward with it.
That's pretty much exactly the way we do it. What stays the same.
Hello. So I want to preface my question by saying I absolutely believe in the power of predictive analytics, but one thing that gives me pause is if we're all putting similar data into similar models, we're getting similar insights, and the same as our competitors might. So I'm curious if you're developing anything proprietary in-house to give you a competitive edge, or are you working with any like up-and-coming agencies to think that way, to really get some like original, like pure, like very original like thought, if that makes sense.
Well, I think it goes back to the IP itself. I think all the analytics are great, but it's like, how does it filter through the brand voice, and then how does it filter through who your core audience is? Because I think a lot of times people say, oh, these are analytics, we got to go after that group, or these are the analytics, this is what we need to do. But if it doesn't fit with the brand, you can set yourself up for failure. And we've seen that with other brands in the past, that there are other key initiatives that people will go after. Like when we think of like Bud Light, or when we think of like other companies say, hey, this is an initiative everybody goes after, and they do great for it. But if you alienate your core audience because you're going after a big whale, you end up drowning in the middle of the ocean. And I think that's what happens with a lot of these brands. So I think it's important to make sure you put it through a brand filter, but you have to know who your brand muse is. And I think that's another big thing we did at CBS. Everybody had an idea of who you were, but I sat down with the company, we brought in an external agency to kind of define who that brand voice is. And we threw up all these word bubbles and all this other stuff, and we sat in the room and we said, but this is who we are. But this is who, and they were full fight, fist fights, almost fist fights, not big fight. But it was like, no, this is what we want to double down on, this is what we want to make sure goes into our brand foundation. But when we looked at the analytics, we were like, well, some of this stuff is good for some shows, but it's not good for the overall brand. So then you get to kind of pick and figure out like, well, if that analytic approach goes for like, say, some of our younger shows are reality based, we go down that route for reality and we can touch on those things and make those wins. But if it's for like our core entertainment shows, we will steer away from some of those things. So it's just always like picking and choosing which IP ties to it.
I think for us, I'll have two answers. From a data standpoint, we've been spending a lot of time really getting into the weeds of our digital, like kind of media buying and planning, and figuring out ways to buy media programmatically for kids, which is pretty challenging. And also doing lots of work to try to eliminate like eliminate like audience overlap, because we're a portfolio of brands company. So we have a tendency, everything's like, okay, what are we pushing out for 30 separate brands? And then you do the work and you turn out, oh, these 5 brands have 75% audience overlap. Maybe that's not the way that we should go to market. So there's a lot we're doing there. And even with buying digital, you used to buy linear for kids, would be guaranteed against age demo. When you buy digital, it's people 2+, right? So pushing a lot to try to get better tools from our media partners that allow us to buy better and be more strategic. But the other thing I would say is super lo-fi, and this is something I'm always saying to my team, is like, watch the creative and change the media plan based on what you think, you know? And I don't think we do enough of that. Like, so in other words, you know, for like a toy commercial, you would run you make a 30 and a 15, right? And back when I started years ago, we would run tons of 30s and then a little bit of 15s, and then eventually that turned to all 15s because the 30s were too expensive. Now there's lots of different things you could do in running it, but like we plan the media plan, and then I don't think people are actually watching the creative and being like, oh, for this product, the 15 is great, we don't even need the 30. And then conversely, there's other products where, oh man, that 15 is not enough, like we gotta run the 30. So I think it's really important to have that art part of it as well, and not just like have the data dictate what you do.
Great, thanks guys. Let's hear it for these guys. Well done.